Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen. This is Run It Back, and I am joined by the man, the myth, the legend, Poker Hall of Famer, and the creator of High Stakes Poker, Maury Eskandani. Maury, how's it going?
Going really well. Isolated, bored? No. Not that these days the technology doesn't let you get bored, right?
No, that's very, very true. You're sitting in your office at home. Everything's good. You're still hard at work.
Everything is good, and believe it or not, there's been more work created, and so easy to have conferences and creative gathering of colleagues and trying to make things happen so much easier. Nobody needs to fly in here. Nobody needs to meet for lunch or anything. It's like straight to business and out. Thanks to all the video conferences that's available now.
No, absolutely. And also, one of the reasons why this program was created, if you're just tuning in for the very first time, this show is called Run It Back, and it's called Run It Back for a reason because we are running back some old footage, and every week I find a new guest to discuss the footage with. Sometimes it's a player who was on the show, sometimes it's a fan of the show, and sometimes, like today, it is the creator of the show. Maury, were you present for every single one of these tapings?
I sure was. I never missed any of the high stakes poker or poker after dark tapings.
That's awesome. All right, we're going to play the intro, the classic theme music to get us excited. Maury, while this is running, how did the music bit come in? Is there a story attached to the song?
Well, actually, music was put together with a group that we contracted to help us with the production. At that point, at the time, they would get us the TV crews, the TV mobile, like there was a lot more equipment involved, believe it or not, to film these shows. And they also contracted the music person, and he was a CBS. He mainly worked for CBS shows, and they wrote the music, they played it for us, we loved it, and we went with it. It wasn't like we tried 20 different musics and picked this. We just heard it, says, okay, this is gonna work. We went with it.
I think it's the most iconic song in all of poker. I'm all in, man. It's stuck in my head forever. And then we're moving on to the next phase here. AJ Benza and Gabe Kaplan. How did you land these guys, and was it a tough sell to get them on board?
Well, it wasn't a tough sell. Let's put it that way, because Gabe is he loves poker, and obviously he loves being in front of the camera. He's so good at it. So he came as natural of a talent as you could possibly bring in. Someone who not only knew the game inside out, knew most of the players that were going to play, and was just itching to let him have it. And like every time Doyle is on the screen, I'm sure Gabe was thinking of something the night before that I'm going to land it on Dolly, whether it was whatever past experience with him that he had, or some that he could just see on the screen and bring it up. AJ was introduced to us by the network of GSN. And just so you know, it's not, poker is a game that viewed by the outside groups, the general population, as card sharks and, the back rooms, plays and all that. They're pleasantly surprised when they come to a casino and see, okay, there's like a 40 table competition going on. They usually, most people, even at that time, more likely at that time, nowadays people see it so much on TV, this different view, but it just somehow came as underground. They wanted to give this a mafia type atmosphere. Let's make it look like, these are good old boys coming together, like all that. And AJ fit the profile there to come in. And as a matter of fact, if you've seen earlier posters and all that GSM put out, I have one in my house. I don't know if you can see it.
Yeah, show us.
Sure. I don't know.
Oh yeah, on the right there.
Right. Hold on one second. I'm getting okay. There you go.
Yeah.
I see. It looks like there's they're playing, and the guys got shovels and stuff in the desert. They're going to dig a body in. So the whole thing was always, and it was something we wanted to get away from. like as poker players, obviously, that's not the game. It's poker is not aces up the sleeve. Poker is all these GTOs and computer programs and everything else that all the geniuses are doing now. It's not the old poker, but it worked. I
Right.
mean, who was I to make that decision?
I mean, we'll dive much deeper into the history of high stakes poker, how it all came together, how the lineups came together. But first, let me address everyone who's watching. If you enjoyed the show, please like the video. It helps us a lot with other people finding the show. We're going to go through 2 episodes of High Stakes Poker Season 1 with the creator of the show, Maury Eskandani, today. So if you have any questions, please let us know, because I'm sure he is the guy who will have the answer for you. And also, please make sure to note that if you want to just watch High Stakes Poker and don't listen to our rambling, you can go to Poker Go and watch all 7 seasons of High Stakes Poker in anticipation of the return of High Stakes Poker. New season in the works, obviously quarantine. So, when it comes back, we'll bring back High Stakes Poker, and we'll have more on that as the information comes out. But today, we are focused on some historic content as we dive deeper into the history of this game. A question coming in from Zachary right off the bat, Maury. He is asking, what was your favorite high stakes poker lineup of all those seasons and why? And I'm going to guess that it's probably the first one, because it was the first one.
Well, look, I seriously don't have a favorite. I can't tell you, like, to be honest with you, every single one of those shows that came together, it was a combination and collection of friends and colleagues and players that meshed together so well that you couldn't wait for them to get down and dirty, because you knew the chips and the words are going to fly the entire time. So yeah, I mean, if I had to guess, I would say many of the shows that Tom Dwan was in it, because I felt like we were not at the mercy of the cards, and this man wouldn't let anybody sleep. So I would say those became my preferred shows to watch or preferred shows to produce, because it was going to be easy. I wasn't like, the show started, we played 3 days, usually 8 hours a day. And we were contracted to deliver 13 episodes. So what if the first day hardly any good hands were played? You're just pacing, walking back and forth. Oh my God, what am I going to do? How am I going to get 13 episodes? Well, you never had that problem with Tom Dwan. But Tom Dwan, you were saying, I wonder how many more I can get. I mean, this could be like 20 episodes from 3 days, because he just never stopped.
Yeah, Tom Dwan, of course, a legend. Back when this first season was being filmed, however, he was probably still in high school, all things considered. This was taped, I want to say, was it 05 or 06 or something?
Well, it goes back. I think it was 06,
okay.
but it could have been 05. I'm not 100% sure.
Okay, so then let's talk about this lineup. Dr. Amir Nasiri chewing on a cigarette, basically going Sammy Farha style, but Amir puts it a little bit further into his mouth. Jerry Buss is on the show, who's obviously, Los Angeles Lakers legend, LA legend in general. How did this first lineup come together?
Well, first of all, I think Amir hadn't seen Sammy Farha yet, so he might have been the first one that started, the unlit cigar.
Well,
cigarettes,
no. 03 main event was before this, so that was when Sammy was having the cigarette already.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, as for the lineup, I mean, again, most of these players I played with, so I knew, for example, if I get Daniel and Doyle and say Ted Forrest together, there's going to be no lack of words, but we try to get it as close as the cash games realistically are. I mean, you don't have cash games saying 6 pros sitting down and says, let's play cash game. Usually what it was, where 6 pros would say, hey, such and such is in town, let's get a game going.
Right.
And this could be somebody like Jerry Buss, who just loved to play poker. He didn't care who was playing with. As a matter of fact, he insisted he would play with the best ever. Because if you talk to Jerry Buss, he would say, you can come to Staples Center, but you can't get inside the court. You can sit real close to them, but you can never get in there and play when the Lakers are playing. But I actually get to play with these guys. I'm not sitting in the ring. I'm coming in and getting inside the court and playing. And for him, it was just a thrill of a lifetime. So he played in many of our shows. He loved poker. So it was natural for us to invite him and say, hey, Jerry, we're going to be on TV. This is the lineup. Lineup didn't scare him. It excited him. When he told him, oh, there's Barry Greenstein, Danny Negreanu, Doyle Brunson, Johnny Chance, oh, I'm in. Completely the opposite way of what people would think. Oh, I'm afraid of him. No, there was no such thing.
That's incredible. And someone like Jerry Buss, did he come to Vegas regularly to play? Because of course he's a celebrity that goes far beyond just the game of poker. You know, we know him as someone who played on high stakes poker, but he's the guy who owned the Lakers for decades. He's a big time LA businessman. That must have been a big deal for you guys to get him. And was it sort of expected at that point because he played a lot in those games?
He played in our circle for way before high stakes poker. I remember playing with Jerry Buss and Frank Mariani, high limit hold'em, not no limit. I mean, no limit wasn't really they always still preferred to play limit. Both him and Frank Mariani, his partner. I remember playing with Jerry Buss at what is Wynn now. I'm trying to remember the name of the casino. It was it'll come to me. One of the hotels that was imploded and became Wynn. I remember playing there, high limit, maybe like 3 or 6 or 4 and 800 limit hold'em with them in like late 80s.
Wow.
So
that's incredible.
Desert Inn.
I love
playing at Desert Inn. There you go.
Desert Inn. Right. So then, was it a big deal from a television perspective to get Jerry Buss as like a celebrity on your show?
Well, of course. Like when we told the network we're going to have Jerry Buss in there, you know, they were very excited. They would ask us, you know, who are you going to have to play? Who are you getting for season 1 or season 2? We always send a list of the players and the businessmen, recreational players that were going to join them. And of course, somebody like Jerry Buss, you can imagine, Game Show Network was thrilled to see him in the list. So yeah, for sure.
That's awesome. Yeah, Daniel Negreanu was sporting the incredible powder blue shirt with the glasses. I mean, for many of these guys, this was also an opportunity to get some very valuable TV time. And I think it also boosted the profiles of many of these players, which in return then made the game of poker a lot bigger. I do remember, and you've told me stories about this before, that at first, when you came up with the idea, I believe, was it at Noodle Bar Bellagio? But there was a story about how putting cash games on TV was never really considered because it was always focused on tournaments and having a champion and having a winner. How did that come to be, and how did all those dots get connected?
Well, it was natural for what ended up on TV from poker side to be in the form of a tournament because it resembled other sports.
Yeah.
You know, you had a competition, it boiled down to 3, 2, and then you had a champion. Cash game isn't that. Cash game is just saying that, hey, we're going to play basketball, but who cares what the score is? They're just going to be shooting hoops. Well, where's the fun at that? Nobody was thinking that we can just play cash game.
Right.
And the way it came down was purely accidental, but I did grab on it. So I can't take credit for thinking of let's put cash game on TV. But when it came to me, when we were doing a pilot show for GSN, we were trying to do a gimmicky kind of poker show for them, where it was educational, funny, you know, like sort of like would be, wouldn't be just poker played as we know it. As a matter of fact, we had like, we wanted to introduce some elements in there where a recreational player could have changed the flop, or playing against the pro, they could have sneak a peek, meaning like throw a card's lifeline, let me see one of your cards, or things like that. We did the pilot, they watched it, they didn't like it. I was sure they didn't like it. We went to dinner, and while we were at dinner, Johnny Chan walks over. He was a friend. And he just casually says how big of a beat he took in the game that he was playing. I think it was like $600,000-$700,000 pot that he lost. And he was describing how it happened. Again, remember now, those days, the GSN people I was telling you, they understood gambling. They really did. And they do now also, but not as much. They weren't as much involved as the producers they were, you know, dealing with us then. So after Chan left, just walking through the casino towards the elevators for them to go to their room, he casually asked me, do you think a game that he described, first he asked me, what was he describing? I said, yeah, they're playing poker. It says tournament? I said, no, that's just a cash game. These guys hardly play tournaments. When you see games at the Bellagio, they're all cash games. So he'd seen the games and he said, do you think something like that would work if we put that show on? And I didn't have to hear us. I immediately, like in my mind, I could say, how the hell can it not work? I mean, every time we play cash game, we have so much fun. We just have to have the right people. If they have fun, I mean, let's go back on TV shows that you've seen poker, from old school of Maverick, Bat Mastersons to to the new rounders, whatever. None of them are really tournaments. These are all, like premise is a cash game, but the conversation and the bluff and the needles is what gets people watching. So I was thinking immediately, yes, that can happen. So I told him, let's talk tomorrow. I think we have something here because, yes, I think a cash game done right with the right people will be good to watch. I never thought it would catch on like this. I never thought, like I thought it would be just a good variation of something that's never happened on TV. But of course, we were lucky enough to have, like just the right people in there, and it was all these guys that you've seen on TV.
And then there's
thanks to them to make it happen.
Right, and there's cash on the table. People like Jennifer Harmon wearing the leather jacket. Like everybody looked cool. Like it was a very sort of special vibe. The suite setup. There was people sitting in the background that made it sort of feel casual. But the cash on the table and the stakes for this game, that's what I'm also curious about. How did you decide on that format, the stakes, the blinds, and having the cash on the table?
I never decided on anything by myself. I had a really good friend those days that started out World Series of Poker, ran it for 17 years, and was a card room manager at the Golden Nugget, moved on to becoming a card room manager at the Mirage. We were friends for many years. We still are very good friends. His name is Eric Drake. Many of you might know him. He's in the Hall of Fame as one of the pioneers of poker. So he was certainly my best counsel that I had. I consulted with him every step of the way as far as like the structure should be with all that. But I also went to the players and I said, listen, this is your office. You're coming to your office to film it. What do you want to play? I mean, sometimes if the right person was around, they would want to kick it up to much higher than the first episode. I believe it was 2 on 400 blind with 100,000 buy-in. We had games that they wanted to buy like 2 million and they couldn't come to agreement and they bought them for 500,000 on play. So with the Gila Liberte when he was playing in the later seasons. So this was the creation of this structure and number of players and all that was all the players. I will put it on their plate, discuss it, have them over sometimes to my house. we're like sit down for dinner and talk, or we'll get together all of us and say, what do you want to do with this? And even that part of it, I think we filmed it one time when everybody was like throwing suggestions. Hey, let's do this, let's add this, let's like blah blah. So yeah, the creation and my main reason to go to them and ask them is because of what they were risking.
Right.
It just wasn't fair. Hey, you're making a $300,000 buy-in, Jennifer, and you're playing with, like this lineup. Maybe she wasn't comfortable with that. So there was always a sweet spot that they decided.
How often did you get asked back in those days, like, are they playing with real money? Is this real money? And did people understand that this was actually their own money at the table here?
I got asked that all the time, not from the poker, not within poker. Everybody knew, everybody that knew these guys knew that, yeah, for sure, they're playing their own. They're not fakers, none of them are that. They may have like certain players might have a backer, but the money is real and most likely it's their own. I remember taking my son to a college in Boston, even there, like away from Las Vegas. And while he was doing his thing, I found a golf course. I was, trying to play, spend my day that way, and got matched up with 3 people. and they asked me what I was doing. And as soon as I said that, they mentioned high stakes poker immediately. Oh, really? High stakes poker, watching and all that. And that was, I could not convince them that this was their money. They just thought I was bullshitting them all the. I said, no, no, seriously, this is real. So you telling me this is not for TV? It's not made up? Come on, that cannot be real. They couldn't. I mean, I couldn't convince them. Like there you have it. So I know there are a lot of people out there that just didn't believe that all that cash, all that betting and bluffing was real, unless you were within the 3-4 million people that really do, dig the game and understand how poker works.
A question came in earlier, by the way, and some shout outs to the people in the chat. Manuel, John, a guy by the name of JR is in the chat, Mark. Seeing a whole bunch of people here joining us, which really appreciate. If you like the video, please like it as well as you're watching it both on YouTube or on Facebook. And please keep those questions coming as well, because this is the guy who knows everything about high-stakes poker. But a question came in from John, our good friend John Bovenizer. He said, did Maury ever consider playing himself, Maury? Did you ever come close to sitting down?
It was definitely, it's still a bucket list of mine to play a cash game with some of my friends. But I actually made a rule at that time, without anyone approaching me, that none of our producers or our employees or staff, obviously they couldn't afford this, but even for anything that we produce, they cannot play in it.
Right.
And it's just the nature of the game. If you're producing it and somehow, and those days, we were actually recording the whole cards. We didn't have the technology that we have now, where the whole cards are immediately going into a system and loading up on a graphic, and we're delaying it for half an hour, 45 minutes, whatever. At that time, all those cameras that you'll see, they were under the table, as you can see it on your screen. They were being recorded in recording devices. So people weren't even seeing it. Like right. Nobody was seeing what cards we did. Just like let's say you're recording the show. I'm recording Jennifer's whole cards the entire time that she's sitting there. So the 8 recording machines recording all the whole cards. And there was just one person that would walk in there and make sure the red lights are blinking. The cameras are recording, so we didn't have a camera go out, and we don't have hands from one player for 3 hours. So that was the only monitoring they did. They never went over, stopped and see what was being recorded. So we really had no knowledge of the cards until the post-production happened, where we took all those and they would put it on files and they sent it to me in whatever format it was. And I would match the cards with the players per the time code that they were playing. So there was a lot more work than, what's happening right now. There was really a lot of tedious work to get all that done. Even then, I knew somewhere in the back of somebody's mind, it could be that, hey, he has access to people's hole cards. He's recording people's hole cards. And if you sit there and make a nice laydown with 2 jacks, somebody could question, oh, really? He just let that go? Or right. It wasn't worth for me to ever get in there and play. And also, it wasn't like I was itching to play No Limit Hold'em with these guys. They were light years ahead of me, light years. But I would play Limit Hold'em or 7-card stud if that was ever caught on TV, which it didn't. It was never high stakes made with 7-card stud. I kept wanting to do a Larry Flint game with 7-card stud. Maybe it'll happen. Who knows? Maybe that, but I won't play in that one either.
You and I talk from time to time, and I feel fortunate to work with you, and I've learned a lot already in the years that I've been working for Poker Central and Poker Go. But I love the fact that you're still not giving up on Limit Hold'em and 7-card stud. You're still holding out some hope that maybe one day we'll see stakes big enough for it to be compelling.
Remco, Limit Hold'em and 7-card stud saved my whatever you want to call it. I had a business when I was 24 years old and completely went bankrupt. And I had 2 kids and married, and 7-card stud and Limit Hold'em absolutely saved me and turned my life around. So yes, I'm very loyal to those games and very loyal to those players. I still have friends. I don't see them as much. And one of them just dropped by because the situation that we were in, he brought me some cookies and stuff. and he's still grinding, playing limit hold'em. I mean, I'm talking about 40 years.
Wow.
Just still grinding. And these are the people who never played whole tournaments. You never saw them on TV, but they're still out there making money. So yes, if you want to make a living, I will tell anyone out there that wants to become a poker player, don't fantasize what you're seeing on TV, because yes, that can happen, but it's unusual for it to where you're buying in for 500,000 and playing, nosebleed games. But it's totally realistic to play mid levels or smaller level games and make decent living for entire life, if that's what you like to do.
Right.
So some people prefer, having a mansion or some, dreams of grand dreams. But some people say, hey, I'm happy to make 100,000 a year, 110,000 a year playing poker and have my own time and, live my life. So there you have it. I know many people that have done that in Las Vegas for many years.
What I also want to know about, and I heard a small bit from you about this, is how the show was cut and produced. Because obviously you mentioned earlier 13 episodes had to be created, but obviously you had to see what fit into what episode. So how did you create the narratives, and how did you put together these shows? Because obviously, as you said, each hand was recorded individually on this whole card camera that we're seeing, the pocket aces of Amir Nasiri on right now. So you were basically laying out a giant puzzle. So how did you do that?
Well, there's one exception on episode 1, and I haven't spoken about this, and I'm not proud of what I did. Let's put it that way. I'm not proud of, because I was put in the corner to make the show happen and deliver to the network,
right,
with certain hypotheses and certain requirements that I had to make this a storytelling game. And what people didn't realize, the game was the story. I didn't need to create a story within the story. Yes, we could have interviews with the players, go to their homes so you know who they are and all that. But as far as the play went, you just dealt and played, and that was the story. I was put in, they had hired a producer that was a story producer, and he couldn't find a story. I mean, he wasn't a poker savvy person. So they were really heavily relying on me to make this a story. They just didn't understand. So what do you mean it's cash game? Where does it start? How does it end? There should be a beginning. There should be an end. I know there's no champion, but how do we tell a story? And trust me, I was going crazy trying to figure out just what is it exactly they're asking from me. Remember, now I was a poker player turned to TV. It wasn't, and I couldn't just connect the dots. Like, they want a story. They want a story. What is the story? Like, Doyle Brunson comes into this game and loses a lot of money, and then comes his son and takes his revenge. I mean, I can't make that happen.
right.
What story are you looking for? So I finally decided maybe I'll tell a poker story. And by that, show some elements of poker. So the first day of the shoot, I think there were if I'm not mistaken, maybe 100, 120, 130 hands played. And I had every single one of them formatted. We're going 3 months after the shoot, and we hadn't delivered episode 1. And they were we had 1 month or so, or maybe not 3 months, maybe 2 months. We had a couple of weeks, 3 weeks to deliver episode 1. I remember being at the Commerce, because that's where I stayed, and traveled back and forth between Studio City, where our post-production facilities, and the group that we were working with, and Echo Entertainment that, we worked with them for many years. And I would come back to Commerce. I remember bringing all the beats. By beats, I mean everything that happened in a hand, from the start of the hand, what the level blinds were, who had what hole cards the person had, raised, flop, turn. And we had 120 of them. I remember taking those and basically putting hand number 1, hand number 2, and tape it on the window that was at the Commerce in my room, and looking at all 120 hands, saying that, how am I going to tell a story? I mean, what is the story? I'm looking at this, I'm trying to solve a puzzle, and I don't even know what the puzzle is. So I finally decided, you know what? Let's make it so Daniel Negreanu Daniel, don't hate me. Daniel Negreanu plays three hands where he is bluffing. And I wasn't paying attention where you were playing this. I think if you go back to the first three hands, you'll see that Daniel, raised with a rag, got away with it, raised with a rag, got away with it, raised with a rag, got away with it. Then he had two kings and trapped a couple of people for a nice chunk of money. In other words, I took hand 4 and hand 11 and hand 36 and hand 92 and made those hand 1, 2, 3, 4 of episode 1.
Wow.
If you pay close attention, thanks for our experienced editors, you didn't see Doyle Brunson switching to Todd Brunson and back. And none of the other geniuses that played in the game, I guess it's been so long since they played, nobody said, Maury, that didn't exactly happen this way. Was it the right order? So I remember putting the first episode of the hands by shuffling these 120 hands around and trying to make the first episode make sense. After I got done and we edited and we put it together, I felt ashamed. I mean, I felt like I'm not giving what is realistic in the world of poker. This is not it. So I put my foot down with the network. I said, look, what happened here is not right. This is not what happened. We cannot change the timeline. From episode 2 and on, the timeline is not changing. It is what happened. I will take out some hands, the boring hands. I would tighten some hands that people were thinking for so long. But if there's a good conversation in the hand, you're going to hear. You're not going to jump around trying to tell a story. There's no story to tell. This is the story. And they agreed. We produced the second hour of the first season on as the right timeline, as it occurred. And of course, the rest is history.
I mean, that's a fantastic story. I mean, that is one for the ages, and I think almost nobody ever was aware of that happening. Take us behind the scenes during this first season. You're on set. I've been on set for taping of Poker After Dark and Super High Roller Cash Game and all sorts of big games. So I know there's always some chatter before they sit down, and this guy forgot his money, and this guy has to get a wire. What was it like being on the set there before the cards went in the air? What was the scene and the vibe like? And was there sort of an adrenaline sort of mood in the room?
Well, tell you, look, with the players, there was no kind of drama. It really felt like they were coming to the poker room and they were going to start a game. They were actually excited to play a good game. They knew high stakes poker always had a couple of recreational players that would come. They were good action, or even the pros, a combination of pros that were all good action. So it was, for the players, it was really business as usual. The stress and all of that came with the production crew of sometimes 80 to 90 people to make sure that we don't miss anything, something doesn't go wrong. These guys are playing for a lot of money, and that's what was stressful. And to me, not understanding exactly all the nuances, that was all the different aspects of the simple explanation of what we're going to do is makes sense. We're recording the cards, we're recording the player's voice, we're filming them. The director is cutting, as the action is happening. But there were a million other things that were going on in that mobile truck that I didn't understand. And it's like driving a car, but you don't know. You're sitting in the back seat and you don't know what the driver is doing. You're always more nervous than when you have your hands on the wheel. And I'm not saying that I understand everything perfectly now. I'm not a technician, but a lot better now. I'm a lot more relaxed. Even you can imagine these were all edited shows. None of these were live, and it was nerve-wracking. So now we switched to live in some of the shows, not high stakes poker, and still I'm so much calmer because I just know that there's no problem. The guys got it. I'm lucky enough to have so many incredibly talented people there. They know what they're doing, and so yeah, the stress level was more with me and the crew than the players.
Let's listen in a little bit on this hand set over set here between Ted Forrest and Amir Nasiri, and I'm sure it'll spark some memories of this day.
He's taking a long time to decide his raise also.
Ted Forrest raises another $16,000 into the pot. It's now over $70,000.
We have a situation here, AJ, where both players are sure they have the best hand.
Yeah.
And we're seeing a lot of acting going on. Now, Ted Forrest might be wondering right now, he said, what does this guy have? Now, if Dr. Nasiri knew Ted had as strong a hand as he does, he'd put all his chips in and he could save his performance.
Right.
It's so funny while we watch all this tanking going on. Sammy Farah is standing in the background holding a drink. There's a lot of people sitting in the background. Was that like, people could just walk onto the set, or could people bring guests and stuff?
Well, the idea was, again, if you played at the Mirage, Bobby's room, and those days they had a couch. They had people just sit down, like your friend will come, you're playing, they will sit on the couch, or your spouse or whatever. And sometimes they order food. They had it together right there while they were playing a high game. It was sort of a exclusive room. And when a big pot happened, your buddy would come up there and see what's going on and take a look. So we tried to create exact same atmosphere, like really make these guys feel like they're playing in their office.
$200,000 in the middle, set over set. One of the first big pots in high-stakes poker history.
Listen to him.
The turn card, an ace.
3.
Oh, come on, guys.
River cards a 9. And Nasiri wins the hand, taking down over $200,000.
So this is like a really good classic example of I don't know, can you rewind or no?
Yeah, of course. Where do you want to go?
Rewind it like a couple of minutes, see what Doyle says. So Nasiri is new to this crowd. And he said, I raise, but he didn't say what he was raising with. So this went on for like a minute and a half before he said how much he's raising. Just imagine, like, Ted Forrest bets. Here, just listen to it. It's like, to me, when you're cutting this, there's no way you're going to lose that conversation. Right. So you can just listen. Nobody talks over them.
Oh, look at this. Negreanu with just jack high throws $6,000 into the pot. He's lit the fuse, and there's going to be fireworks.
Oh, commercial break. Very smart.
Yeah. Okay.
That's a
cliffhanger. It was a cliffhanger.
It's a three-way showdown. Daniel Negreanu's forcing the action with a $6,000 bet on just jack high. Ted Forrest and Amir Nasiri both flop sets. And Forrest calls.
I raise. Oh, Danny. You play that junk, you gotta be rewarded for it.
You raise?
Yeah.
He makes it 6,000 more.
That's not my usual raise.
This is the moment you're talking about.
Yes.
So he puts in the call.
Nasiri matches the $6,000. But he doesn't seem sure what he's going to raise here, Gabe.
Let's watch the whole clip and then break it down.
This is kind of unusual.
You were serious about the raise, right?
Yeah.
Share it with the rest of us.
Yeah.
$14,000 more.
14,000 more.
So, I mean, what that conversation there, what you saw there is as pure as organic as a real thing. That was a real thing that would have happened if we were playing at the Mirage or Bellagio or anywhere else. That was it. That conversation was going to happen. And that's what made this whole thing so special.
Who are some of the players that you wish had played on high stakes poker that either said no, or you didn't ask them, or the timing wasn't right? Were there people on your list that never played?
there was one in particular that we invited a few times. Something always wrong with this kid. I'm calling kid. He's older than me, I think. Sam Grizzle.
Oh,
He thought Sam Grizzle would have gotten under people's skin, and it would have been just a very good, fun episode. We could just never get him at the right time, whether he had money or he had backer or he had whatever problems, and it didn't happen. But obviously, if I mean, there were people that couldn't play. I wish Stewie was in the game. Believe it or not, I couldn't get Chip Reese to play.
yeah.
Because Chip also was like he was a great limit all around player. He didn't play that much no limit. I couldn't get him coming and play in the high stakes, but I wish I had him play. But Sam Grizzle would have been so much fun if he got in, and especially if he won. If he lost, he'd be quiet. But if he started like catching a few hands, he would have let these guys have it for sure.
I mean, one of my earliest memories of going to WSOP in 2009 was a very quiet Amazon room and one guy yelling. And then I heard another guy yelling, and it was Sam Grizzle and Mike Mattisau at the same table in like an Omaha 8 or better event. It was a whole spectacle. Like they're playing a $1,500 tournament. It was a whole spectacle. But yeah, Chip Reese is probably the one name that really could have played, and it's just a shame that he never did. And then of course, he passed while the show was still taping, I believe in season 2 or 3. But yeah, that's too bad. But like guys like Doyle, Barry, Daniel, and Antonio, those are the 4 players that played in all 7 seasons. Was that because they were the fan favorites? Was that because, you liked them as part of the sort of foundation of the game? How did it come to be that those 4 guys always returned?
Well, recruiting players for these kind of nosebleed games, it wasn't like these days where you had 400 kids that somehow have a $20 million bankroll. But those days, there were very few people that could actually afford these. So I would have a long list of people to call that I would think it was going to be a good mesh. I either hear no's or maybes. You can't exactly have maybes when you're doing the production. You can't have maybes when you have three TV trucks coming in, 100 people crew, and 4 players. That can't happen. So I needed 100% commitment. And the group that you were talking about, if Doyle said he was playing, it was 100%. Antonio said he was playing 100%. Daniel, the same thing. So there were certain pros that I went to as the base that I knew I had those pros. And now a lot of them became substitute. Of course, businessmen that played, made the difference too, filled the empty seats in a way that attracted other pros. Those were, you saw them more in high stakes poker because they were ready to rumble every time you called them.
Right. Oh, that's cool. We're watching a little segment here with Amir Nassiri in his house, going from a well-dressed, suited-up businessman, or doctor in his case, to what was the image of a poker player, wearing the glasses and the hat and the jewelry and the big watch. I think it's hysterical seeing these clips and watching sort of how that guy sort of turned into a different persona when he came to the poker table. Also, shout out to everyone watching in the chat. If you want to watch this poker action without us talking over it, because the purpose of this show is to analyze the game a little bit, break it down, and hear those behind-the-scenes stories from Maury Eskandani, you can head on over to PokerGo.com right now and watch all 7 seasons of high-stakes poker there at your own leisure without us talking in your ear. If you have questions for Maury Eskandani, please let us know. Please also like the video while you're watching. We have a lot of poker action still left on this stream and a lot more stories to get into right now. One player that I want to highlight, Maury, and this maybe applies a little bit more to Poker After Dark, because that's where Phil Hellmuth really had most of his outbursts. But still, he had quite a few on high-stakes poker as well. What has your relationship been like with Phil over the years in these televised games? Because obviously, his famous words on the first ever episode of Poker After Dark were, "Get Maury in here. Are you going to give penalties for this?" So tell me about that and how you and Phil have been going back and forth over the years.
First of all, Phil and I have been friends for a long, long time. Before TV and after TV, during TV and all that. My gut feeling is when he was yelling my name, in the first episode of Poker After Dark. I mean, I could be wrong. I should really ask him someday. I think he just wanted to get me in front of the television camera. I think that's what he was trying to do. But why are you calling for him? And he's done that several times. It's not like the first time. That was the first time. But ever since then, any chance he gets me, he sees me somewhere, he will call me or he will strike a conversation with me to get me in front of the camera somehow. So I think that was his motive, but maybe I'm wrong. He was, obviously, when he plays, we've seen him to get a little hot with certain situation that could come up. Either it's a bad beat or some ruling that he didn't like or whatever. And in Poker After Dark cases, Sean Chacon, whispering to his ear while he was trying to make this big decision with ace 10 against two kings.
Yeah.
I remember that. But I don't think he had that many. I didn't have any issues with him in high stakes poker. He played, I mean, there's no way I'm going to remember, but I'm going to say at least 2 or 3 episodes of high stakes poker he played in. And I don't remember having any issues. And he ran pretty bad too.
Yeah, he ran bad, but he also was put on tilt. I believe it was season 1, I think, where he sat down, he immediately lost 2 big hands, and he was steaming, and everyone was making fun of him and needling him. Did you also put these lineups together knowing that these guys can take a joke back and forth because they have this familiarity with each other? Or was it sort of like a coincidence that certain people ended up together?
I never wanted to put somebody in there that wasn't a part of a group. So, for example, even Dr. Nassiri, we played with Dr. Nassiri every day at the Mirage. He's a gynecologist. He'd come, not every day, but I mean, many, many times, like 2 or 3 times a week. He would come and play for a couple hours, 3 hours, or, he was always really good action. So when I went over and told him, hey, I'm doing something like this. I don't even know if you play No Limit Hold'em. He snap called it. Yeah, I want to play 100%. Put me in. So, it was putting the groups together really came from the poker room in front of the camera. It didn't, like all of these guys that you see here, some maybe not as much as what is, I'm forgetting names. I'm getting old.
We got Ted Forrest, Jennifer Harmon, Jerry Buss.
Sitting next to Ted Forrest.
Daniel Alaei.
I mean, right. He was high limit, very respected No Limit Hold'em player. So none of these groups, none of the guys were happy to see him. Like they would ask me, hey, why did you invite Alaei? I mean, he's like, don't you know he's top pro? Yeah, he is top pro. I get it. And like I would get some, but you like watch. He says the least word.
He doesn't say a word.
Not part of the group.
Yeah.
Now, if we put his friends in there, he would come to life, no problem. But he doesn't say one word to Ted, nothing to Doyle or Barry, but Barry and Doyle and Daniel Negreanu, they have no problem going back and forth. But Daniel Alaei is pretty quiet. So you can see, live and learn. Okay, so don't bring a pro that has no repro by like with the other pros.
No, that's a very good point, because it's probably like one of the best if you do like a poker quiz for a whole bar full of people that are fans of the game. It's probably a great question to ask, what was the lineup from the first episode? And then everyone will forget about Daniel Alaei because he didn't say a word. And all the other names are probably remembered pretty easily because they're all, they all became personalities. One name I want to bring up, and he's not on this episode, but he is part of it, is Bob Stupak. He is a Las Vegas legend, obviously. I believe former owner of the Stratosphere. There's even a joke, Maury, that you've showed me on a highlight reel thing that was produced. I don't even know what it's called exactly, where Gabe Kaplan takes a shot at him about his looks. So, Maury, tell me about the involvement of Bob Stupak on High Stakes Poker.
Again, Bob was one of the guys that we played poker with. So I was very familiar with him. He knew me and we talked. So every time we played, he would say, I want to play in high stakes poker. You have to invite me next time. You have to. And it was no problem. I mean, I knew that none of the pros would be, like, they wouldn't ask me, why did you invite Bob Stupak? But from his style of play, I also knew he played extremely tight. I was going to bring somebody to the game that was going to play one hand or three hands the entire day. So I didn't want to do that either. So it's okay for you to be conservative, but you got to have some move, some play to be a part of the show. If you're going to be sit there, I might as well just put your cardboard in there and, like people didn't know if you're there or not. So I went back and forth. I couldn't make up my mind. Then he said, you invite me and I will bring $1 million to the table. I put $1 million on the table. I said, listen, if you are guaranteeing you'll put $1 million on the table, you're in. And we're filming the next season at the Golden Nugget. I think the first 2 seasons were at Golden Nugget. So I told him, if you do that, you're in. $1 million, guaranteed. So his name got on the list. He was going to be in one of the episodes of High Stakes Poker. Comes the day of the show. And I call him in the morning, Bob, you're coming, right? Yes, you're playing, right? I always did. That was my policy, no matter how. I always called the players in the morning and say, you guys know we are filming today. It's poker players. You never know. They might get stuck night before and forget all about it. You're coming today, right? Yes, I'm coming. You're bringing $1 million, right? He said, well, I'm going to bring somewhere between 100,000 and $1 million. Already, like, I know, oh my God. I said, Bob, don't do this to me. He says, no, you're going to get, I'll bring somewhere between 100,000 and $1 million. You say minimum buy is 100,000, right? Somewhere there. Let me see what I can get my hands on. I'll bring it. So I'm just saying, fine. He was, he might bring in 500,000 or 600,000. So here he comes. Hallway, he's walking. And the security guard that he's got with him is carrying the bird cage with his chips in it. I see all black chips piled up in this bird cage. I mean, I don't know if the chip cage that they put in. It's a plastic chip. You see the chips inside, they're carrying it. And I see it from the far, and I walk over to him. I said, this doesn't look like, what is this? He said, I told you I'm going to bring between 100,000 to $1 million. What do you want from me? I said, well, how much is it? It was 102,000.
Oh my God.
It was 102,000. I never forget this. I didn't know what to do. I didn't have a player waiting there, but I didn't let him put 10 racks of black chips on the table. I mean, look what Doyle's got in front of him. Doyle had $1 million, by the way, or 500,000, I think.
Yeah.
And 500,000 in front of him there with the $25,000 chips and all that. This guy is bringing 102,000 in chips, all black chips. You can imagine. So I made him change it. I said, you can't put more than one rack of black in there. And got him some other colored chips, got him some cash, made it look like. And of course, he only played 3 hands the entire day. So that was Bob Stupak's story. But a controversy happened that he was in the middle of it. And it became kind of fun. The good thing about cash games, things can happen. And it's outside of just playing poker that it can turn into a fun day.
No, definitely. So got some questions coming in from the chat. Multiple people asked this question, actually. How did you choose which casinos to play in? And were you actually at that casino, or was it just a TV set?
So to answer the first part of it, I chose a casino that had the available time for me. So like if this is a ballroom, or if we go into a convention area, or any space that they had, if there was an available time, because we would decide when we have to shoot so we could deliver to the network. If the next season of High Stakes was ordered by GSN and they wanted to air it on February, this show had to happen sometimes in December or November for us to be able to make it. So I would start calling the casinos, go to different places. Sometimes the casino would show an interest and even reach out to me, say, hey, you want to do the High Stakes Poker here? Come take a look. In this case, the Golden Nugget, they had a lot of remodeling done, and they wanted me to go take a look if I wanted to take a poker show there. And of course, it was beautiful. It worked out. It was one of the grand ballroom. But we've done High Stakes Poker all over the city. We've done it at Palms, I believe, at South Point, at Bellagio, I don't think we've done it at Aria. We did it at Bellagio. It was last season that we did, until, of course, coming to Poker Go Studios soon. It'll be Poker Go's High Stakes Poker. So we're building a beautiful stage for it. So that was always a challenge with not just High Stakes Poker, with any show, finding the space in Las Vegas that had a poker room because you were going to play the game in a licensed casino with their employees and poker room staff under their license. We were a television production company. We couldn't just come and say, we're going to rent a place in some warehouse and turn it into a stage and
Right.
play poker there. That wasn't going to happen. So we got in touch and we got a space that was available. That's why you'll see us in different places. And the second question that you had, what was the second question in the chat? I'm sorry.
Well, the second question you answered already was basically, was it really there, or was it just on a
Yeah,
soundstage?
100% there. Yeah, it wasn't inside of their suite. Obviously, that's a stage that we built.
Yeah.
And in some of the highlight shows, we actually back up the camera and you see the stage, and Gabe makes fun of it. So, yeah.
That's really cool. It's a really cool story. In the later seasons of High Stakes Poker, and for the people who are just tuning in, we are watching High Stakes Poker Season 1 with one of the creators of the show, Maury Escandani, who is also part of the Poker Hall of Fame, has been in Vegas for many, many decades. And if you ever run into him, ask him for a story and he'll keep you going for 45 minutes because he has so many of them.
Yeah, stories never end.
So one of the things that happened in the later seasons is that new personalities were introduced, and I was wondering how you felt about that. Obviously, we know Tom Dwan was very well received. Tom Dwan became a fan favorite, but also there were guys like Dario Minieri and Andreas Heuvel and Lex Velhaus and, Dennis Phillips, some of the main event champions. All these people were introduced into the cast in the later seasons. How did you feel about these guys being in the mix, and were you happy with the choices you made in hindsight?
What changed from beginning seasons to later seasons? The beginning seasons, I knew everybody. I would reach out to friends and colleagues that I either played with or knew them really well and knew they would mesh together and all that good stuff. Then it changed where people saw the show on TV and they started reaching out to me. So I would get a bunch of emails and calls, references. A player would say, hey, you've got to get this guy in. He won't let us down. I played with him. He's really fun. He's good action. So, or we made a simple policy that any WSOP champion immediately has a seat in high stakes poker, because there's one thing for you to win, to become the world champion. Then there's another thing. It's almost like entering a new level of poker and show us that what you got against these cutthroats, or, like the best in the world with all the experience. And so you see a lot of WSOP champions that played in there, like Jamie Gold and a few others that played in there. And, some did poorly, some held their own, but none of them really, they are changed now. They're a lot more experienced, but none of them at that time could really compete with cash game players. I mean, they had a tough time, being relaxed around them. Of course, Jamie Gold created some incredible episodes.
So Jamie Gold and Patrick Antonius, those are two guys that clashed a few times. It was great to watch. Sammy Farha and Patrick Antonius. Patrick was part of the action. That's one of my favorite hands of all time, King Queen against Jack 9, where Antonius has two pair, I believe, and Farha just has overcards and a flush draw. Sammy Farha also became a legend in the 03 main event, and he added layers and layers and layers to that on high stakes poker. Was Sammy without cameras the same as Sammy with cameras? And what's your story with Sammy?
Sammy is one of the exceptions. I shouldn't say exceptions. They're few. He was totally the same guy. Sammy didn't leave the stage and became a different person, or didn't enter the stage, became a different person. Sammy was Sammy, never changed. As a matter of fact, I think many of the players, I shouldn't say it was an exception. I think many of the players are exactly what I just described. I don't think any of these players coming in, and they transform into some personality that's not theirs when they play. I guess they weren't doing something that they were not used to. I mean, yes, every time we play a high limit, a no limit game, we do try to put different image of ourselves, not because of the cameras, because of how the game is being played. So if you're going to be playing a few hands, but you want to be really talkative to hide that fact that you haven't been playing a hand for the last 35 minutes, because you're always in the conversation and having fun. So that's part of the game. That's not really your personality changing. You're just throwing something out there that's not real. Or if you're the kind that, like robbing everybody blind, but sitting seriously and acting like you're, like as conservative as it can be. So I'm not talking about that. As far as like people like Ted Forrest, Barry Greenstein, Doyle Brunson, Jennifer, these games, when you run into them outside of this game, you didn't see a different person. Their characters didn't change. They weren't acting. Let's put it that way.
Here we got Daniel Lai with a big overpair, and nobody folded before the flop, it feels like, and Forrest making trips. Let's see if this goes anywhere.
Okay.
Doyle Brunson's going to push the issue. He takes an $11,000 stab at the pot with pocket fours. Now we'll see how far Ted Forrest's slow play can get him.
Oh, cliffhanger again.
We got away from cliffhangers in the later seasons.
And Doyle Brunson just bet $11,000, hoping to take down the pot with pocket fours, but Ted Forrest has flopped a set of sixes, so this could be trouble for Doyle.
Well, not that much trouble.
It's funny how he called it a set of sixes. Of course, he got trips.
I'll tell you, so many of this stuff happened between Gabe and AJ. And I think after this one, we probably told them that there's a difference between a set and trips. AJ, when you see 2 sixes hit and somebody's got a 6, they have trips, they flop trips. But if they had 2 sixes and a 6 came in, they flopped the set. This didn't make the show, but one of the shows, somebody flopped 4 queens. And AJ said, not jokingly, seriously, oh, such and such flopped 2 sets of queens. The combination of Gabe and AJ was really wonderful. So I can't wait for them to be back in action again, because Gabe had all the knowledge and AJ took it well and brought, the lower level poker that many people outside enjoyed listening to, and have just Gabe bash at him with, like every mistake that he made.
All right, let's see if Eli can get away from his queens here.
He makes a crying call for $3,000. The only way he can win this pot is to catch a queen on the river.
And remember, there's only 1 queen left because Jerry Buss had a queen. And Doyle won't call for $3,000. All that experience told him that he's drawing dead.
No queen for Eli, and Forrest triples up.
Forrest was short. I think the name Ted Forrest has largely been forgotten by the new age poker fan, but he was part of the Corporation versus Andy Beal, or actually, he sat down while they were playing on his own dime, and he was the guy who basically, he had the biggest cojones of anyone just trying to sit down with Andy Beal. And then he was also on High Stakes Poker. He's won 3 bracelets in 1 year. He has all sorts of records, and probably one of the biggest gamblers, of the last 20 years, so to say. Give us your insights on Ted.
We always talk to the players to give us some nuggets for the show to, when we are doing features or interviews, or give some information to our talent, AJ and Gabe, to talk about it. My conversation with Ted Forrest, I never forget it. I told him, what was your experience when you played? Tell me about the day that you walked in, because I was there. They were playing heads up, Andy and Chip. And they had all agreed that they were going to play heads up, pull their money together, and one person will play Andy.
And let me interrupt you real quick for the people who are unaware. The book, The Banker, Suicide King. God, I can't even recall what the title is of the book. Andy Beal versus the Corporation, the biggest poker game ever played that we are aware of. So Maury, please continue. The book is, by the way, amazing. Everybody should read it.
Yeah, but what Andy did, he raised the stakes so high that people couldn't simply afford it. It wasn't like, the highest stake we've ever seen anybody play was 1,500, 3,000. All of a sudden, he was looking to play 20, 40,000 limit hold'em. 20, 40,000 limit hold'em. That means if you just called a hand without any raise, you were involved 160,000, 120,000 in the hand without a raise. Just call. So one raise goes up 200,000. So it was just insane limits. So that's where, by cooperation, it wasn't anything shady. It was people not having money and saying, okay, I'm willing to put up 50,000 or 100,000, whatever. They pooled monies together, and one person will play. So they have enough chips to play against them, have a chance. Ted Forrest walked in and just sat in the game. All his money. So that means he emptied his box. I don't know what he had, 200 or 300,000, whatever he had. He put it right in the game. So he was telling me, I told him to write what happened, write how he was feeling. It was fascinating how he said he calls the Mirage and says, what are they playing? Usually like people called, we didn't have the information that's on the net now. You call and say, what are they playing? Says, yeah, we're playing this and that. And
Oh, that's Ted Forrest. Ted Forrest on the phone.
no, I'm going to hang up. Okay. So let me also disconnect this so it doesn't come in. This is my private phone. I mean, from home office, nobody really has this number. So whenever somebody calls, it's a spam. It's not Ted Forrest. So anyway, he was saying how he was feeling, that when he called and they said there was like a 200, 400 stud going and this game, and they're playing heads up. Chip is playing this guy heads up. What are they playing? Playing 10 and 20,000, limit hold'em. Ted said the entire time that he was walking to the Bellagio, he was talking to himself, and he knew there was no way he's going to be able to hold himself back. He is getting in the game. There was just no way. So he was totally ready. He walked in, he went to his box, and he still, until the last second, hadn't made up his mind, until he sat there, said, deal me in, and then made jacks full, something like that, a hand that he had jacks full. And, you can imagine, with the raise, he just won like 300,000 or 400,000. And sure enough, after that, they had to like pull him on the side, say, hey, by the way, there's, he should become part of the corporation. It wasn't expected but yeah, that was, Ted Forrest had huge heart, and he still does. I'm sure he still has, he won 3 bracelets in 1 year, World Series. He was the first person to win, triplets. But yeah, he was a wonderful player. Staked a lot of people in the games, and had a big heart. Everybody knew about his.
Yeah, no, I mean, I wonder what he's up to now, because I only see him really during the World Series of Poker. I'm sure he's not, crushing the big games anymore like he used to. That's a whole different era. One player that also is connected to both the Andy Beal story and high stakes poker is Phil Ivey. The story goes, and Raymond Davies once told me this story in a video that took off on YouTube, where Phil Ivey saved the poker world when he beat Andy Beal for a lot of money. And the story goes, and Ivey told me in an interview later that, not the whole story is true, but the story as it was told to me was that Ivey was sitting courtside at the Lakers, and that someone from the corporation, I don't know who, reached out to him to come play Andy Beal because they were getting destroyed. Like, he was winning a lot of money. And then Ivey took a private jet, flew to Vegas, and basically crushed Andy Beal in a bunch of sessions. What's your version of the story? And were you aware of it in the moment? Were you there? Have you seen any of the action? What was that like?
I don't know the details of the story, exactly what happened, but believe it or not, Andy Beal, when he first came to town, he was playing in our game. He actually played in the game I was playing in. And we were playing like maybe 8160 hold'em or something like that. And like within a week or two, it got to where he was playing 2 and 4,000, 3 and 6,000 in full game. And a couple of trips later, it became 10 and 20, 15, 30, 20, 40,000 limit hold'em. I mean, things that we just never ever thought was completely like, nobody could ever believe it. So, but I know one day he was winning 6 or 7 million from the group. I don't know if that's all the money they had. But I mean, I also know that if this group, they were obviously the best players in the world. If they needed to raise money, they would. But that would mean that they had to give up 80% of their, earn to. If they had lost, let's say between all of them, they had 6 million. Let's say they had 10 million. Andy Beal won the 10 million. Now, if they had gone and raised money with millionaires and billionaires of the city to continue playing, the deal would have probably been that you get 10% to play. So it would have taken them forever to get back what they lost. So it is possible that, they had lost half their bankroll, and Ivey came in and got it back for them, because if they'd lost the other half, you can just imagine. And, playing limit hold'em heads up, especially when some other peoples are relying on you not to lose, that's like added pressure. it's not like, you're putting your money up there and you're playing, you can make a lot of mistakes. And I'm sure Andy wasn't the kind of guy that just called. He was probably one of the most aggressive players at that time, a recreational player that played very aggressive. And heads up limit hold'em is the game of aggression. If you don't play aggressively, you can almost never win. So you can imagine if you are playing for a lot of people that are relying on you, and then you lose that aggression, it can spell disaster. So yeah, I can see Ivy coming back and saving the ship.
It's definitely a crazy story. Someone in the chat, Joe, is referencing to Freddie Deep going south. How that is an iconic moment because Freddie Deep was getting really upset at the table. This is also part of season 1, I believe. So the question, I guess, I have to pose to you: did Freddie Deep go south?
I don't know if he actually went south. I can't tell you if he did or not. If I had to guess, I would say if he did anything, because I know he had a backer. The reason I know he had a backer because backer made sure that I knew he was backing him, and for whatever amount of money he put in. It's possible he took the stake out. If he didn't want to lose the original buy-in, 100,000, whatever it was, it's possible. I really don't know. I have no idea. But the reason everything got out of hand, it was all fun and joke. Hey, you went south, didn't you? All that. I think Chan started it, and then Daniel followed up a little bit. And Freddie was first giggling and laughing, and then he realized, well, okay, this is going to air somewhere, and his backer is going to hear that he went south. That's not a good thing. If somebody's backing you in the game, you don't want to hear somebody went south. So that's what upset him. That's when he started vigorously defending himself and saying, what the hell you guys are talking about, and blah, blah. It got really ugly. And that was one time I wasn't called to go on, but the game had stopped and the argument was going forever. So I had to go in there and just stop it and get the game going. That was the story. I don't know if he went south. I don't think even if he did, he probably called the guy and said, hey, I'm winning, whatever, 110,000. I'm going to take 50 out. So we, in case something bad happens, we don't lose the whole thing. I got 2 more days to play. Who knows? But I don't think he did it in any kind of malicious, intention or anything like that.
I think also the footage later showed that he wasn't, and everything was sort of a big cloud of smoke and nothing really happened. So, I mean, it's just a really funny moment. And I think the fact that people are still referencing it now, all these years, this is like 15 years ago, means that, even those small controversies live on for a long time and people will forget about, the boring moments. It's that crazy stuff that stands out. As far as...
I don't know if you know Roger King from the King's production. He was a billionaire that played with us. They did Jeopardy, and they have all the huge game shows on TV. It was mostly King's production. His brother reached out to me after what happened, after that episode aired. It wasn't poker that attracted him. It was what happened, how purely organic that was, how real it was, unscripted, and that can happen in a cash game. He was so fascinated. He said, well, are you thinking about doing this? And said, I don't have, this is all owned by Game Show Network. We don't own it. So he was trying to figure out a way, okay, how do we do this? How do we bring something like this on? So it just goes to show you high stakes poker wasn't about all playing the game in a high level. Right. It was also what could happen, what could transpire in a game that was attractive.
For the people watching right now in the chat, YouTube and Facebook, we are live. We are watching High Stakes Poker Season 1. You can ask whatever question you have in the chat. And please don't forget to like this video. It helps us a lot with the channel. Maury, how much of what you guys filmed hit the cutting room floor? And were there any moments you couldn't broadcast for some reason or that just sort of didn't make the cut that were good?
We try to average between 12 to 16 hands per episode. So we can just figure this out because I never really done the math. On an average 3-day, we ended up with somewhere between, I think, 3 to 350 hands or something like that. So each day would give us 120, Well, I'm not thinking right. Let me.
So I mean, probably like 30 hands an hour at most, as far as when you're taping.
Yeah,
Because
they're playing. I think they played less than 30 hands an hour.
yeah,
They really did because like the stoppage that we did. Sometimes technical things that let's stop. We got to fix the camera, or whatever. I think a course of a day they probably played somewhere between 80 to 100 hands. So if they ended up with let's say 260, 300 hands in 3 days, that turned out to be 13 times 12 hands on average. So I would say 50% of them definitely was left in the cutting board.
wow.
50% of the hands, yeah.
So do you still?
And you know what? It was funny because like when we format these shows, I used to get the DVDs and watch it. I just watched the whole day, and I put down P for poker, C for conversation, and P for poker had either an A, that's a must make TV, B if you don't. So if I had 13 A's, then that was my show. I didn't have to even look at the B hands unless A happened and there was a conversation because of it that is spilled into another hand. I just showed it. The hand didn't mean anything, but the conversation was so important. So I would say definitely 50% or more was left on the cutting board.
That's kind of crazy to think about. And obviously, there's a reason those hands didn't make it, but it's still kind of crazy to think that there are moments that we missed that there might have been something good in there that we now, it's sort of lost forever. Let's pivot a little bit into looking into the future. Obviously, quarantine is happening. We're just doing the show to keep you guys entertained. Watch all 7 seasons of High Stakes Poker on PokerGo right now if you want to dive back into the archives. I certainly did that, and I've been having them on repeat on the big screen along with some of the Poker After Dark episodes. Maury, when you look into the future, let's just talk about, lineups and thoughts and how you think the game should play. What do you think the return of High Stakes Poker should look like from your perspective?
Well, I mean, obviously, the most important thing is working out what's going to happen with the pandemic.
Right.
I would say that the very first time that game over 4 or 5 players being played at the PokerGo studio will be High Stakes Poker. When we go back in the studio, we're operational, we're running. We are 100%. That's on our plate to do. So it'll be the first game that is shot in the studio. Will be High Stakes Poker. So we are totally determined to, this was supposed to happen in April, and we had it planned, we had players invited, we had all that. So the way I envision, the game is not just being played. Those days you could find a High Stakes Poker game in one location. It was Bellagio. Sometimes, like you hear about some big No Limit Hold'em games in Europe somewhere, but mostly it was one location. So you could go grab all your players there and then have those players reach out to some of the friends or recreational players that they played with and widen the circle where you had, your choices and created the 3 days of games. Now there's so many different pockets and groups of people playing No Limit Hold'em all over the world. In Los Angeles, there are 2 or 3 groups playing, and back east is so many groups are playing. So we put the words out, this is going on. And we, again, core players, believe it or not, like Antonio is still very active. Obviously, we all know that. So someone like him or Tom Dwans and Phil Ivies of the world that are still playing nosebleed games, they would help us to create the pool of the players we want. My preference would be to bring a group of people. For example, they say there's a group of people playing in Los Angeles, they're playing like bi-weekly or once a week, they're playing a nosebleed game. I would love to have that group lifted and brought them right and drop it at the PokerGo studio for the next season of High Stakes, at least for one day of it, because I know it's going to be endless conversation. There's no way you play with a group of people every day. That's so much thing hasn't happened between you. You create nicknames for one another. You reminiscent of something that they did, that you bring it up and you embarrass them. I mean, that's the show. So am I familiar with those groups? No. Fortunately, I got people like you to rely on, the Brent Hanks of the world.
Brent is our insider. He has everyone's phone number.
Of course. So, there's, and of course, a lot of the credits should go to players that what happened in the past and what will happen in the future. They're going to help us players are going to help with this because they're bringing their own money. They know what a good game looks like, and they know what we're looking for. We're looking for an action game. Please don't call and say this guy is such a great. He could be a great player. That doesn't mean if I don't see him raise with 5-7 offsuit once in a while. I mean, it's just okay. That's not who I want.
Right.
I don't want you to bring somebody that can just has all the patience in the world because
from your perspective, having been around the game for so long, in the last, let's say 5 years, have any new faces emerged that you're a fan of off the top of your head that you can think of that, you know, would fit well into the current climate, but also match well with the old guys? I mean, I can call Daniel old now. He's over 40. So do you think there are new players? And I'm talking like, you know, no older than like 35 out there that you think qualify for a stage like this?
100%. First of all, you know, you remember players' names by playing with them. So now that I'm exactly not in the circle anymore, except definitely not in No Limit circle of players, I'm going to only rely on people that came in playing our Poker After Darks. I've seen them play in the tournaments. And yes, I think somebody like Chidwick, he could definitely get into, if he decides to play in cash game, he's not going to be able to hold himself.
Right.
He's not going to be the guy that's played aces. Of course there are. There are a lot of young kids that if they just don't play in the cash games, they play in the tournaments. So that's why we would have to rely on cash game players or some of the, you know, tournament players that are willing to turn into cash game, turn in and play. And I know they can. And maybe for high stakes seasons, they will do that. They will make the transition. Yes, we'll be able to good lineups together. We'll be able. I don't think there'll be shortage. As a matter of fact, I think there's more players now than in the past.
Yeah,
I'm sure everybody wants to see the past players. As a matter of fact, if the first season, if our comeback of high stakes poker is exactly the same group that you're seeing here, 16 years later, I think everybody want to watch it. If I could bring Doyle and Daniel and you know, Jerry Buss, rest in peace. Obviously, you know, but Barry and everyone else, people would just see how different they're playing, how different they look. But I'm sure they will still act the same way.
Yeah, probably for sure. And I'm seeing a lot of suggestions in the chat right now. People loved Guy Laliberté. He was probably the biggest splasher of all the players that played. Sammy, Antonius, Doyle, Gus Hansen, Jamie Gold. I think Jungle Man is probably a great guy to have on the show in the future. There's just so many characters right now that we can pick from. So I'm just excited to see the show return. Ivey is an interesting character too because he's been all over the place, and he also did not play on the first season of High Stakes Poker. Did you have a hard time convincing him that this was a good idea?
Ivey wanted to play in every single season of High Stakes Poker. Every single season. I can't remember why he wasn't in the first season. I mean, there has to be a reason, whether he was out of town or whatever. It wasn't like we didn't invite him. It wasn't like he was around, we didn't invite him. He was in the Poker Superstars. You know, that was one of our very first shows that we did. High Stakes came after that. So we definitely wanted Ivey, and we know, you know, his value to the game. But his exact words to me right now is he wants to play in every single season of High Stakes Poker that we are going to be shooting going forward. So expect to see a lot of Phil Ivey.
Well, there you have it, poker fans. Ivey seems to be on board, and that's music to my ears because he's
so is Tom Dwan. He wants to be on every single season of High Stakes Poker. Now, I don't know if we're going to do this. I don't think you want to see every episode of Ivey and Dwan, but there'll be in quite a few.
So let me bring up a few specific moments, and we'll close out the show with that. So if there's any more questions, you got to ask them now. And don't forget to like this video as I keep repeating myself. But a few specific moments. One was the quads versus full house, Gus Hansen versus Daniel Negreanu. While you were on the floor and the cards got turned over, was your first thought like, this is what I need for TV. This is going to be an iconic moment? Well,
remember, I didn't know. I mean, I had no way of knowing that they have quads versus.
No, but at Showdown, like this was an all-in hand, right? So they showed their cards.
Yeah, well, of course, once they showed it, you knew it was an A+ hand. You knew that was like, you know, if you were lazy and you didn't have the time or whatever, for whatever reason, like, you know, you were swamped and you have to format the show this one day, you could really look at the beats and go by the highest number of pot.
Right.
But like the pot that was 700,000 and 600, you knew those were going to make it. So there were always like 3 or 4 of them, and you put those in there, and then you look around them to see what is matching with that hand. Is there a conversation after? So you could, and I admit I cheated a few times when I had no time. I had to like format a show. I ran in there and did it that way. But usually I watched the whole thing and, pick the hands. Yeah, I mean, certain hands, as soon as it happens, it's making it. Jamie Gold and Sammy Farah's Aces versus Kings. We didn't even take 1 second off. That was one of they made our life so easy.
So is it true that for the hand between Phil Ivey and Tom Dwan, you had to cut out 10 minutes because Phil Ivey was taking so long to decide? And this is the moment where, if people remember this, Tom Dwan is staring at the table and he almost starts crying because his eyes are so dry from the light or from whatever it was. But basically, did you have to cut out a lot? Because it seemed as though Ivey was taking forever to decide.
Ivey had 2 sixes, I think, ace-6, and Tom Dwan at 8-9 suited, and it was like obviously a pure bluff. And Ivey kept thinking and said, "Well, you guys are going to have a hard time believing what I'm thinking with." Again, we didn't know his hands. We really didn't know. Like I said, those days it's being recorded in a recording machine, and none of us knew what was going on. And of course, we had to cut some out. I mean, you can't have, people are expecting to see 13, 14 hands, and they won't appreciate it. I mean, if we kept the whole thing 7, 8 minutes or 6, 7 minutes, they're not going to appreciate it. Nobody's talking.
Yeah.
They know it's a big decision. All those players are pros. They know if there's a real big decision in there, they're going to stay away from conversation. And how much can Gabe and AJ talk about that hand? They can't. There's not enough conversation. So and we probably cut, I don't know, maybe 60, 70, 80% of it to fit it in the segment.
Let's listen in on this hand. Some big cards.
Performance many times in different cities, all over the world.
When you come by, I know we're going to do a lot of games. These guys are open. Keep raising.
All in.
All in.
Wow. He just bet $500,000 right here.
Whoa. Toyle Brunson moves $500,000 into the pot.
Getting frisky.
Elia gets out of the way. Bus folds.
Okay. Barry's calling.
There's going to be some blood, gentlemen.
Barry didn't even think about it. He called immediately.
Putting in his last $82,000 into the pot.
There it is.
What was your best hand, Jerry?
Greenstein's in trouble as we head to the flop. 3-8 ace, and Brunson flops a set of aces, and it's all but over for Barry Greenstein unless he gets running queens. Turn cards are 9, and Doyle Brunson wins the hand on nearly $200,000 in a single.
I'll tell you like a funny note that I remember. Like when he said he put his last 82,000 in there. So that's kind of like cheapens it. I mean, like we were saying, as a matter of fact, he just put his last 82,000 in there. So I would get a note from the network producers that, they I think just about every season until the last one, they would come and sit in the voice room when we were voicing it. The note would be, can you add something to it? I mean, can you say like he just lost, a mini condo like somewhere? Like, I mean, Gabe and I would look at it. That's not going to work. We can't say he's just like. So I think a couple of times Gabe said something, but you can buy a couple of Mercedes with that, or something. They wanted to hype it, like, hey, there's real money out there, and people losing something that's just so valuable. Just to say, hey, he just put 500. He just spent 500,000. Can we just say he just put in enough money, like to send your college to kids, your kids to college and back, whatever.
All right, a few final questions here from the chat, Maury, before I let you go, and it's been amazing rewatching all this footage. The chat is asking in various different ways what the highest stakes you think could be that ever could be televised on high stakes poker. And of course, Poker Go has had some really high stakes games. Triton had some really high stakes games. What do you think the highest stakes could be? And maybe this question goes into a different direction where maybe the ultra high stakes aren't the best for TV. Maybe just below that is better for the audience. So what do you think about the stakes?
No, I mean, I would say the higher the stakes, the better.
Okay.
I know we're talking about, people don't believe it. People are not going to believe 100,000 and they won't believe 10 million. So I'm not worried about that. I think mostly our industry, people, the poker viewers and people that understand poker know it's real. So what are the high stakes going to be? I'll tell you, we never thought when we were playing poker, we'll ever see anything bigger than 2 and 4,000. We saw 20, 40,000. We saw, as a matter of fact, last game that Andy Beal was playing was 100, 200,000 limit hold'em.
Wow.
So yeah, that was, anything is possible. For this, I've heard, I don't have confirmation, that there's some nosebleed no limit games in Asia or in LA or other places in the world. And I don't, like I said, I don't have confirmation. They're just huge. They're unimaginable how big these games are. So to me, anything can happen in high stakes. Yes, it's possible. We're going to start with 100,000 buy-in, 2 and 400 blind, like we started this episode. And like I always tell the players, this is your game. You want to kick it up? Kick it up. It's a cash game. I mean, no floor person, no supervisor will come back when you're playing in a poker room and say, hey, you can't kick it up if the whole table wants to kick it up. So they can do whatever they want to the game as long as they all agree. I don't want to invite a player and then put him in the corner and, he's not comfortable. So once they all agree, they can kick it up. In the meantime, if somebody calls me and says, hey, this group that we are playing in Texas, this group we're playing in Miami, we're playing 5,000 and 10,000 blind no limit hold'em and 5,000 ante. Are you interested? Hell yes. It's not even going to take a second. Of course, come on down. It's ready. I'll polish the table for you. It's all good. So anything can happen. I have no idea how high it can get, but I'm hearing super high limits exist out there. So yes, I can see us playing 3,000 and 6,000 or 5,000 and 10,000 blind no limit hold'em.
If you are excited about to play on high stakes poker and your home game happens to be $1 million buy-in, please hit me up on Twitter. Slide into those DMs at Remco Rinkema. Find me on Twitter. I'll get you in touch with Brent Hanks, who will get you in touch with Maury, and then we'll see what we can do. So if you have $1 million buy-in home game, do let us know. Maury, thanks so much for being with us here on the show and Run It Back. It was an honor and a privilege to have you on. And I believe in the future you're going to make it happen that we can do this with Gabe Kaplan.
Absolutely. I'll get Gabe come over here. We'll have fun. And AJ, we should do that. That's a date. Okay. Gabe and AJ on Run It Back with Remco.
Perfect. Gabe and AJ Benza are going to be on Run It Back. So subscribe to this channel if you don't want to miss it. Subscribe to all our social channels as well. We're going to make that happen, of course, in the future. Quarantine, blah, 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 all that stuff, sadly. But we are trying to entertain you guys all throughout the quarantine. And I am going to be back on Thursday at 5 p.m. Let's say this right, 5 p.m. Pacific time, 8 p.m. Eastern time, joined by Brandon Adams. Me and Brandon Adams are going to watch High Stakes Poker. He was on the show as well. I believe he played on season 4 or 5, so it's going to be fun to have Brandon Adams on the show. One of my favorite characters in the game, Maury, I'm sure you're a big fan as well.
Of course.
All right, perfect. So, Maury, thanks once again. You guys, thanks for watching. This was Run It Back. We'll be back on Thursday, 5 p.m. Pacific time, 8 p.m. Eastern time. Don't miss it, watching High Stakes Poker with Brandon Adams.
Okay.